So very glad you're here. This is not going to be a tough conversation, I don't think. So that's good. It won't be meta, as our students say. I'm Lara Schwartz. I teach in government, and I'm the director of our new project on civil discourse.
I'm Amanda Nannarone. I graduated from SPA in 2017, and I'm a current student.
And Amanda has been working with me, can speak to actually a wide variety of the roles that relate to what we're going to be talking about today. Because Amanda served as a GFAP. How many of you use GFAPs or any kind of undergrad support, living learning community leaders like complex problems or program assistants like okay. But it's a role or student work study if you're a staff member. So that's a role, and then served as a graduate TA. Do any of you use graduate TAs in your courses? Okay, super. So it's super important. And then has been the person working very closely and intensely together with me to create what we're rolling out as the project on civil discourse. So we're doing this together, and as you'll see in the presentation, the role of that student link or transitional person link to your undergrads or law students is a big part of what we're talking about. So what we're going to do in here is the sort of classic CTRL, we're teachers and staff, and we have challenges and opportunities that we want to do with our students to deliver great stuff and be happy people in our workplace. And so some things that are drawn from teaching experience, including our flag course, Intro to Flag SPA 189, that we've really actually done a lot of development of together, as well as in the new project on civil discourse, which has a number of student-facing resources. It actually has a number of faculty resources as well, and things that faculty and staff can work into their student-facing work or their own kind of vocabulary building around tough conversations. What we'll do is we'll talk about the challenges that face us with tough conversations in political climate, et cetera. Having SATs in your life is another, right? We'll talk about, we'll just show you what our solutions are. We'll have some student-facing ones that are very much in your classroom syllabus planning area, and we'll transition that into talking about how the project on civil discourse integrates with that and offers some stuff for that. Last time, I think it was in 2016, did a panel of Professor Barron and then two alumni on the general topic of tough conversations before there was this project. One thing I noticed was the room could have kept talking for 5 more hours because this is, as the students say, there's a lot. So what we want to do is if I sound like, or Amanda sounds like a tobacco auctioneer, and you actually need us to pull back, stop us, ask. But what we do want to do is give you live land and then get into a conversation that's what you want and need and what's resonating or not. Yeah. Sound good? Do you want to see? Okay. One thing about tough conversations is that something comes up every single day. You're like, oh, I'm wondering about tough conversations. Oh, good. Berkeley didn't want Ann Coulter there. Good. We've got another tough conversations thing. This one, Ian Milheiser. I hear Tucker Carlson is planning an entire hour of programming tonight about some gender studies professor in Maine who gave a conservative student a C-. And I think that really says some stuff, and some things about the challenges. So one challenge is the black box between what we're doing as faculty or student-facing staff and what they're seeing. So we had an assignment in CLAG that was, you have 5 choices of policy problems you could solve. It's a government class that's got a very problem-solving approach. So one of the choices was, what would it take to provide undocumented people healthcare in Oregon? We get 2 papers that should be failures. One is healthcare human right. Bernie is tattooed on my shoulder. Medicare for all. Hate neoliberals. Healthcare, and Democrats are terrible, and we should just have healthcare for everyone, and then It's like, oh, well, that's kind of a fail. And the other one is like, blah, blah, illegals, criminals, incentives, kick them out, wall, make America great. It's the identical paper, actually. It's not a paper. It's a big, yeah, that is a nicer us. It's a big piece, right? So they're both Fs for the same reason, if you can stomach giving an F, which is another question. But the person who's done the sort of MAGA bad illegals, when he receives the very, and I recommended, the better your feedback is about why a C- was 1. This doesn't answer the question, so it's pretty plain, this is not bad. But that person is seeing, oh, liberal people, didn't like what I said. And the person who, felt the burn so hard they didn't read the assignment and looks at the feedback is not automatically thinking like, oh, I was just sort of oppressed for this reason, might receive the feedback. But one thing that you're seeing is that I don't know if this gender studies student earned any C- or not. Tucker and we'll get to the bottom of it, I'm sure they threw up on the web. Need to know. But one thing that I do know is that it seems from our classrooms, I think, there's a greater chance that if she got a C-, this person deserved, there's a greater chance than that the C- who, on that other end of the things, a greater chance that they might suspect it was for this specific reason. And that's a challenge that we have. Another challenge that we have is obviously our students are coming out of a much more opinion media dominated environment. And so coming in and going, well, lots of people are experts who don't have particular education or work in a certain area are paid to give opinions, and that's kind of what I do. And like it and don't like it is about being on teams. And there's a disconnect between our applying academic standards and that sort of non-standard for opinion giving. So it's a change from discourse out in the world to academic discourse. We'll talk about that. The current curriculum, Lara, has some challenges that might be more specific to subject matter areas that engage with hot button issues. I do constitutional law and government. But dishonesty plays a different role than it did. There are heightened threats to marginalized communities. I'll be forthright. There are people who have something at stake in current debates than others. Students with disabilities are in a, wow, what if we die because Medicaid services and supports go away? That's, a bigger deal than some other theoretical things. I love the flat tax. What if it doesn't happen? It's a big deal. Immigration, another threats. Attacks on academia, professors as, indoctrinating. Okay, Tucker, it's hard to get them to read the syllabus. Like, there's no way. I'm telling them what to think, sure. And then when you combine that with SETs, the challenge, it can be tough for some of us to set limitations and push back on people. When you're pushing back in the effort to enforce academic standards, but they might be perceived as an effort to create an ideological consistency, right? And Amanda has experiences with that in office hours. I don't know if you want to sort of jump into that or with sort of dealing with the sort of theology.
Right. So we had several students in our clay class. I was the clay graduate assistant in the fall and the spring. And in both semesters, we had 2 very conservative students. And we actually had multiple conservative students. But the ones that actually came to my office hours expressed that they felt that, they weren't being listened to or they weren't being heard by the other students in the class because they had a conservative viewpoint. And the other student expressed that he didn't think that he was receiving the grade he should have been receiving on the assignment that we had done. And my job as the graduate assistant, I read drafts, I talked to them, and I tried to help work with them, plan their projects and things like that before Christmas graded them. And, I sat the students down and I was like, we gave you a rubric. Look at the rubric and look at the feedback, the extensive feedback that I had given you when you would come in to talk to me and try to see, is what I actually wrote on my paper reflective of the feedback Amanda gave me, reflective of the rubric that had been given to me. And eventually he came to the consensus that no, he did not fulfill the assignment completely. But it really took me sitting down and having that conversation with him one in class, we, before every time we have an assignment, we like to take at least 15 minutes to go over the rubric and the project assignment and tell them, like, this is what we're looking for, this is what we want. So they have those expectations, they know.
Yeah, and I think that gets to a challenge that comes out, is Amanda mentioned feeling not heard. We are in a space where there are students who feel like maybe I'm the only one in the room. And it can be people of color, and that actually sometimes is even the actual case, where you're the only person of color from your specific person of color community, or maybe the only one at all. It happens in some classes, that's difficult. Or you're the only conservative student, or one of only a few, or one of only a couple of vocal ones. And you've come into the room with the expectation that regardless of where you're at with your professor, there's a classroom dynamic and a challenge for us as professors, I think, and staff too. I really feel like it's across the board in a lot of ways, is to say, okay, well, we've come in with the intellectual diversity piece and the demographic diversity piece, with having hard data that some people feel less comfortable and safe here in this discourse community. 33% of African American students here are currently reporting feeling like it's a safe, welcoming, inclusive environment, and many conservative students speak up that way as well. So because you have it's another thing to bear in mind. How much balance, how much mediating role can I as a professor play? It's one place your transitional figures, GFAP assistants, graduate assistants, people like that in that space can really play. They're a transitional figure and say, I had Professor Lopez and she isn't like that. Like, you really have to get in touch with the objectives. That being said, for those of you who do work with students who support your work, the flip side can be true too. Students perceive their GFAP assistant, their program associate in a living learning community, their peer leader of these people as staff, which they actually are. And so if that person joins the fray, it's made your life a lot worse. They perceive an institutional bias. So they can support you. It's great to ask them for that. But I actually really recommend talking to everyone in that role who works with you to have them be part of the communication around safety and expressing a diversity of opinion and in wanting to be stood up for if you're marginalized in some way. Okay, so now the solution. So we're going to march through a bunch of stuff that we have. Like I said, some classroom facing, some coming out of the corporate program. Being explicit about expectations, which is a bit of what Amanda shared at the assessment level. We'll talk about at the classroom, class level, course level. Exploring and setting community standards together, tying tough conversation mores and norms to learning objectives and the purpose of higher education at all. We cut out a lot of stuff that's terrible just by being like, hey, is this helping us learn, U.S. history of the 19th century? No? Cool. Then we don't have to do it. Work with students actually on speaking and listening as a course goal. Move from a rights model of speech to a responsibilities and values model, and use some of our stuff. Use our stuff. Okay, so be explicit about expectations. This is my only non-pretty slide, and we'll put the slides on the Blackboard. You guys know there's a Blackboard page for this talk. Great, and you'll also, I have some cards and things to find it as well. I do a class policies and procedures thing with every syllabus. Mine's a Google Doc. I actually do a Blackboard quiz where all the students indicate that they've read both the syllabus and the class policies and procedures. It's an easy Blackboard quiz. It's ungraded but required. And it's got some fun joke things, like, how do I get an extension? Ask Amanda at 4 a.m. No, that's not true. Okay. So it's got some fun things. But I tell them very explicitly about speech and expression on this document. So I say it's a time to engage with challenging ideas, and your responsibility is to support claims of verifiable evidence. We certainly don't talk these talking points. We talk about, people. Oh, liberals are terrible, conservatives are bigots. Michael just, always says fake, right? I heard that from, Fox, so it's great, or I heard that from Rachel Maddow, so it's good. Well, if you heard it from Fox or Rachel Maddow, it's probably not on the syllabus. Right? You're responsible for it. We don't get to sit in the back and be like, oh, she's a homosexual abortionist, so I'm going to get a C till the end of the semester. We're grown-ups here, except obviously for me. But okay, keep not getting fired, so let's just go with this thing. And then I talked to them very explicitly about at the beginning of the course, not just as I talked about that rubric, which is a worthwhile investment at the assessment level, but the course level. And this way I can work in universal design for learning, meaning making your course equally accessible to everyone, regardless of disability, prior sort of privilege, role in life, whether they were on the debate team earlier, if they're outgoing, neurodiversity. So, I say what I'm assessing their knowledge of, and that you know what you want to assess, so you include it. And then you say the things that you're not assessing: native English language proficiency. I don't teach college writing. Disability or neurodiversity, prior knowledge, preformed opinions, political belief, identity, access to professional and personal networks. It's an important cue, I believe. Or any other factor. This will be on the slideshow. Obviously, this is like putting on someone else's clothes and wearing. It has to relate to your values and learning objectives. But I do recommend doing it. You both do. So speaking and listening, you'll see that we talk a lot about listening. Discourse includes listening. And it's certainly in you trying to get your job done wherever, whether you're counseling students on their careers or teaching physics, the listening piece that they're doing is critical. If we can build that up, the writing gets better, the test taking gets better, the conversations get better. So incorporate listening, but again, tying them to the university objectives and mission. So one of the biggest challenges we face is we come into a classroom and we talk about false equivalencies. We talk about what learning communities are for, what college is for. And people are very enlightened. We go around and say, what's great classroom discussion? What's good? What's productive? And some very nice person raises his hand and says, you have to be open to all ideas on both sides. And so then we're helpful when we say something like, really, the Holocaust didn't happen? And then it's all silent and terrible. And so we're like, yeah, we're doing something right. So in a way, we have to, we've seen that we have to break through this idea that every idea that percolates through somebody's head has a place in the classroom. Now, whether it has a place on the quad, the 3 is bigger than 5 club, or the Holocaust deniers of AU club, the flat earthers, is another question that is fortunately not our job to answer. But I think the schools actually answered, like, go for it, right? If you look at our statement of speech and expression, our school's answer is, it's just like if we were at University of Michigan or Berkeley, we pretend the First Amendment applies to us completely. But in the classroom, it's not that. Neutrality toward, sort of garbage is not, it's the opposite of academics. We have professional standards. And tying speech to your learning objectives eliminates in some ways people's sensitivity that what's happening to them, if you're saying, that's not really it, actually, was because Aiden, has a Jeb exclamation point tattoo and feels, or Aiden is from a community, that's marginalized that I just don't get, right? You say, well, are we accomplishing what classes accomplished, and this one in particular? And it also helps to discuss this as a professional norm or standard. We've seen that trope, like you go to college to hear tough things. Actually, some people don't. A white, male, cisgender, Christian, or Jewish AU, heterosexual, non-disabled student doesn't come to AU and expect to be sort of bludgeoned with really tough ideas and materials in their classes and on the quad. That's just not a thing that happens to everybody. And at the same time, the colleges are suppressing the way people behave thing. We all have jobs, and we all know what kinds of things you don't get to do on the job. I push the envelope right here, because you can see, and maybe we've worked elsewhere or loved ones have, and we know that actually in college it's kind of a bigger free-for-all than when you go and work, in Facebook's legislative affairs department. You go work at the Heritage Foundation or, Emily's List or wherever, AU students want to go. It's actually, there's less of a free-for-all than here. So you tie it back to, remember when we're in a class, it's not that I don't like that you feel the burn or want to make America great. It's just that that's not what we're doing. And it neutralizes that. And it also helps to take away from really aggressive speech that is really a challenge for a marginalized person, for a person with a minority view, of some kind. The person who's got it tough in some other way, such as trauma related to the subject matter. And we both focus heavily on being aware and having a trauma-informed approach to tough material, which doesn't mean not teaching it. It just means telling everybody. Some people in the room could actually have experienced something really tough related to this, and we all proceed accordingly. So we can talk. We have trauma-informed discourse ideas in the program. It's worthwhile to have a class where in your intro class, where you talk about this stuff. On the Civil Discourse website, we have these pillars, and we have some other ideas about what those don't have to be the ones. I do feel like, especially in the classroom space, if you're not doing truthful, you can't get to productive, and you can't get to productive, you're stealing your classmates $4,000 for the course. So why are we here, right? But it could be anything else. But having the conversation matters. And when I first came here, I was very leery of having the conversations like the one Amanda described about the rubric. What am I expecting in the paper? So like, if I'm doing that, I'm not talking about the Commerce Clause, or congressional procedure, and so we're missing out. But actually, this is like one of those big time savers, like having a checklist for packing or something. It's one of those things that gives you more room to teach because you're not going off in these directions. So I like doing it in the first class. Or the second. We do it by, we can throw it up on the Blackboard page by having students look at this open letter law students wrote to their professor about why she shouldn't have worn a Black Lives Matter t-shirt in class, and the professor's open letter back to them. We do it not about whether Black Lives Matter is something that is the right thing, or not about the substance, but we do it about the respective roles, responsibilities of teachers and students at the college level. Yes, ma'am.
Just to slow down a little bit.
Sorry, I know it's the, yes.
No, this is great, I love it. So I'm teaching freshmen for the first time in a class. And I remember when I was a freshman, one of the professors wrote, it's all seminar based, and it was very useful. And he wrote, I like it equals the slash through it. It was cool. I still get up until my seniors. I liked it. I liked whatever the topic was. They were responding to the reading. I liked it. It was cool. So there's a civil discourse, but I want to talk a little bit more about what a productive discourse is. Like not just the opinion, which can be respectful and listening and responding to the person, but something that helps you get to the intellectual academic content and not just listening.
Absolutely. So, and we do some information literacy, and information literacy I think is a really important part of civil discourse, and we're going to be offering ideas and supports for faculty who want to work that into their classes as well, and the ideas contact me. But a couple of things that we do. One is, in Pledge we do reading journals, which not everybody has to do, but one is all of my syllabi have a class participation prep bullet under the required readings. So it's be prepared to discuss whether, if, and why, to answer questions about whatever you're hoping to make sure that you can verify they comprehend, and then to discuss things that is the point of the class session. And for their reading journals, but although you don't have to do a journal, you can just say, prepare to do this. All of their reading journals for us, unless there's a specified question, say you have to come up with one thing you've noticed and why you think it matters to the endeavor that you're trying to learn, and one thing that you wondered and why you think it matters. Question asking is really important. So it might be like, what's that? I wondered, and with how would I find out? So I noticed that this piece we were doing on drug testing welfare recipients only related to housing vouchers. And I wondered if there was anything about whether people who use drugs make trouble in their housing. If I knew that, I would know whether it was worth trying to get the drug reviews out, or I wonder if testing them actually makes them leave, or they just stay with friends. And if I knew that, I would know something about the efficacy. So you do, and I noticed, and why did it matter to, oh, today's class is supposed to be about, using, setting limits on public benefits. So what is the thing I noticed? How does that relate to being a better student of that? And then the thing I wondered, getting limitations on their knowledge, because nobody, especially freshmen, in that day's materials makes, or even in the semester, makes people an expert on something. So I queue up what they should be ready to discuss.
That's great, and it also cues up critical thinking, right? And very upstart. That's great.
I actually got, I noticed, and I wondered from a 4th grade teacher. It's fantastic. It's also actually a wonderful peer critique tool. If you do have your students engage in any form of peer critique, not just of writing, but actually especially of each other's contributions or small group contributions, I noticed and I wondered is great. And one thing that I think also, and we'll get to you, answers your question about that in terms of small group discussion or large group discussion is one thing that I'll do in some of my classes. It's not the point one yet, but I should. Ask the students to identify one point that a different student made in class relating to the conversation and describe either as we're doing our share back or on the Blackboard discussion why that person's idea was an improvement on theirs in some way. Thank you. I love that question. You have one in the back.
I don't want to take you too far off track. If you're going to cover this in a bit, feel free to just do it then. But I'm looking at the truthful bullet on there.
Yes.
And the piece of this sort of conversation that is hardest for me is that I live in a world where privilege exists. I know when Nathan and I walk down the street at night, we have a different experience of that. And that is part of my truth. How do I express that truth and how do I make space for that truth in the classroom without it being just about my personal experience? Because it is about my personal experience, but it's about my personal experience, in this case, in the context of a world where violence against women happens,
Right.
which is very much a part of what the truth is for me. Just as an example, and Nathan's going to sit in the classroom and have a different experience of that truth because he's on the other side of it.
I think, our colleague Andrea Brenner, who some of you might know, who recently left, but we're working on a book together, so I spend like 90% of my time irritating her. Her answer to that question was, it's actually great to show your students some form of vulnerability and talk about maybe something, mistake that you've made or some challenge that you have. I think that's not a check that we can write off other people's accounts, So my coming out as disabled is a very fluid and occasional thing in my interactions with students. And I think it depends on the room. I think we can ask students to imagine some disadvantage they've had, or imagine whether they have a feature unrelated to their achievement that has ever gotten in their way in some way. It's easy in my classes. I teach, I assign an assignment called, it's a Garrett Epps article in the Atlantic. We can stick it up on the Blackboard. Free speech isn't free, and it talks about the unequal burdens of free speech. The idea I just said, no, Nathan, maybe, sorry. Doesn't come here and expect to hear, hate speech and have, biased friends, I hope, directed at as again in some way. So it's a complex one, and another challenge of it is we really can't put it on our students who bear unequal burdens of privilege to come out themselves in that way. I think universal design for learning helps a lot. I talk a lot on my first course class day about how the class is designed to the extent I humanly can to be equal, accessible to everyone, and it's not just on the basis of disability, but language and previous expertise with the freshman class. And it gets them at least into the idea that potentially that there actually could be barriers to the class being to your class success that you would need to jump on. But we'll get to a little more of that. Should I go forward or realize we're racing? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on the reading journals question.
Yeah.
So how often do you look at the reading journals?
So actually, I graded all the reading journals, with the exception of if we had like a specific question that the course wanted to grade. So they had to do them twice a week. Class was Tuesdays and Fridays, so Tuesday and Friday I read them for every class. And I made sure I had them all graded before we had class time. That way they could see my feedback. Because usually what would happen is they had to pick something in the reading that, like the professor was saying, that they had a question about, that they engaged with, that was particularly interesting. So one topic we talked about was Edward Snowden and national security. And so if they ask a question, sometimes I will either ask a question back to try to like get them to think about it, to kind of like cue up what we're going to talk about in class that day, or I would try to answer the question if I could, if it was just a basic, like I don't understand the legal blah blah blah.
But you can do it. It sounds burdensome, but it's actually way less burdensome than having a quiet class of people who aren't prepared. And I really recommend, if you've not used Blackboard journals, it's very simple. You set it up advanced. It's right there in your grading center. You see when they're ready. And you can just, ours would pass fail, like, or pass 50% if it's like late or something. Click. You don't have to give feedback every time, but you can just write, I think you should bring that up in class.
Right.
And the other thing that it does, if you're having the challenge of unequal participation or personalities, you can take something, and Nana would send me like, hey, check out what James said. And I'll put it on my slides. Be like, James came up with this. Let's spend 10 minutes engaging with it. If James is a quiet person, that'll be great. It'll draw someone to the foreground. So you could also take an opinion that represents a marginalized identity or represents a minority view. Hopefully a subtle view, our radical moderates who are very quiet.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Those who are new to teaching and still preparing their lectures or classes each time, you might have a limited amount of time to do this. You might not have a graduate assistant you can designate. So one way to do that would also be to have students break the class in half or thirds. So you just have the students handed every other class or every third class. So that can make your workload more manageable. And I also have a colleague, and I agree with you that having them handed in advance means that they've actually thought about the reading, and the class goes much better. And having them get the immediate feedback is something students really love, and that will improve your SATs. And the other thing I'll say is on the upper level classes, I have a colleague, Matt Taylor in SIS, and what he does is something called IQDC. And the students have to bring in an IQDC, which is an interesting question or devastating critique. Wonderful. And so the idea is several times this semester he breaks them up, and it's their ticket in the door. And I also know a colleague who has them put questions up on the board. And that's also a little scary because you're not following the PowerPoint if you're new to teaching. But what it means is you're basically answering the students' questions, and it can lead to really wonderful.
Absolutely. And if the journals feel burdensome or you can use Blackboard discussions and say, I'm just opening a forum, this is Wednesday's forum, everybody throw something up on there. The other thing we do, first day of play, we practice saying I don't know out loud in front of each other. Okay, one more, but then I do want to get to the other stuff as well.
Just a quick comment on the interesting question issue. I think that's part of it. The students are hesitant sometimes to ask the interesting question. I found it quite useful to have one student each week post a question arising out of the weekend from Blackboard, which they all have to answer. And they're less intimidated about writing, saying, is it true that Israel persecutes all Palestinians? Well, that's a tough question. And you then get a whole array of students on the reading and answer it. There are all sorts of techniques to allow them to question, because I think that's so hard.
It's very difficult. If you can get them saying I don't know, and you can get them not to stop perceiving themselves as experts and understanding nobody is, not the seniors, not the grads, maybe somebody in this room is an expert. I don't know. So that's really helpful. If you use the craft of research, which you can also get in PDF form, it's for intellectual property, there's a few things about how to craft questions. I also put this up, we'll throw it up on the Blackboard thing. I put on my syllabi somewhere this Rilke quote about loving the questions themselves as if they were locked doors or a certain kind of foreign language. Oh, she was an English major. But yeah, the question thing is key. discuss the value and ethics of listening. And when I say the ethics, the idea that we all have to write checks on other people's account and say, we're so committed to all ideas are welcome that you have to listen to that the Holocaust didn't happen or slavery was super fun because you got shelter or something. The ethics not only of listening and setting boundaries for yourselves as an adult, but of really saying, am I going to ask this person over there who's a trauma survivor to have this free will and Bill Maher-like discussion? Do I have that right? Is that ethical? The answer is actually personal, student to student, but you get it out there. This is an Amanda thing. I include in class participation some way of demonstrating listening. Amanda works actually with the students. What were the ones that you created that enabled people to get sort of listening chops and proof they worked on it?
So what we did our first semester was we had like a goal project, and there were 5 different ones. Time management was one of them, using AU resources. But the one was accepting criticism and listening to opposing views. And so for the listening to opposing views one, the one exercise I had them do was that they had to go to another group on campus that they disagree with. So we had 2 students that went to a college Republicans meeting. We had someone who went to AIPAC. And so they essentially had to sit and listen to what this meeting was about, what people were talking about. They could also go to like a speaker on campus that we had that they disagree with. And then we did like a discussion board, and they essentially had to share with me their thoughts and their feelings and something that they heard in the speech or the event that they had gone to. They had to like give me a direct quote that they had heard. So I knew like you were actually listening. 1, but 2, they weren't allowed to respond. They weren't allowed to like raise their hand and ask a question. They weren't allowed to sit there and roll their eyes. Like they had to sit there and they had to listen to what everyone was saying. Listen to go around the room and say something they disagreed with. And when they all came back to me, they were like, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do because like the one girl was like, I was like, trying to jump out of my seat at one point because I like so vehemently disagreed with what they were saying. But she's like, but I didn't. And I was like, did you like see the value in that? And she was like, I think I saw that people think things for different reasons. People have different values, different opinions, different ideas for different reasons. I grew up a certain way, and this is why I think the way I do, but not everyone grew up the way I did. She said it helped to humanize the other side, that it helped her realize that just because we disagree about abortion or we disagree about immigration doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person or I'm a bad person because we have a different view. So that was listening exercise.
We're going to throw some of them onto the Blackboard page. Another one is a class policy. We both do Socratic method, which is another way to get different voices coming up and get people reading. I don't call on anyone whose hand is raised while someone else is talking. So it's not possible that you've heard my entire question if your hand is up, and it's not possible that you're engaging with whatever's currently on the floor if your hand is up. So it's not possible that you're actually listening to the person before you if you're preparing to speak. So you just don't get called if your hand goes up. Tie your speaking and learning objectives to their own goals. So Amanda and I worked on this a lot. This is a project on Civil Discourse tool. We are green here. This is a downloadable PDF. You can have your students look at it. It has a number of questions for them to ask themselves. What is the purpose of AU education? What do you believe AU's values are? How do they intersect with the purpose of going to college? What are your goals for your time at AU? What's the purpose of speak? Why do you speak? What kinds of speech do you like? Are there limits to our freedoms? Should there be? What do you expect from other speakers? What makes you more likely or less likely to listen? What make you turn out? Do all ideas deserve equal time? Think about how you measure up to those standards. How do you want your peers to see you? How does this tie to your goals for your career, etc.? So there's a lot of this. Now, this is out in the public space. Anybody can use this for anything. You can use it as kindling to burn flags. We have no control over it. And though, I do feel as a value of this project that we're going to have to go past this. I would love for you to look at it. I'd love for you to answer it yourselves and see where you come down and how this works for you as a professional in the world, in academia or in student sports in some way. I feel strongly that there should never be a graded assessment around how people engage in this self-reflection. But I also think it's a great tool for a class to cue into that conversation that you have about what are our goals for speaking and learning in this space. You can tie them to the goals of academics or your class, to your own. You can say, look at questions 4, 5, and 7. We're going to focus on those. Be ready to talk that way in the classroom. Do a reading journal on it, not in disclosing your stuff, but in, what are you aware of about yourself? Maybe revisit it at the end of the semester or the middle. How is our class measuring up to these ideas we have about our goals for speaking, listening, learning? So there's a lot of things you can do called Building My Voice. It's called that because the idea of this project is that students are the architects of their own voices. Part of civil discourse is that it's your responsibility. Speech isn't consequence-free. No one's arresting you for writing a paper that's like, this is a stupid question because we should have single payer exactly as Bernie found it in the Talmud. So you can say it, it's just an app, right? So we're responsible for our speech. Could mean people don't like you, okay? Which is another thing, one of the challenges we didn't present is living learning communities. People bringing your tough conversations into the norm and turning them into a way to turn on each other. We've almost got the Rand Paul, aficionado, crying. We're almost there. We've got some ammo in class. Let's do it, people. Right? It's not productive. And telling our students how to live is not a great idea. We caution against taking it too far and taking it to the personal, and certainly asking yourself, am I continuing this conversation outside of the classroom because I'm going to learn more, or because we've just got Madison crying, and now she's like, well, we select PPL. And then the other thing we let them know is tie to careers. Someday Madison could be the person sitting at the desk looking at the resumes, of which yours is one, and she's not only allowed to say what a jerk you are, she's obligated. So that hits them down, buddy, because this is the waiting room in front of their careers. So again, work with them on speaking, listening. This is what Amanda mentioned. This is my favorite all-time philosophy quote ever. It's from Jurassic Park. Move from rights to responsibilities. I have a right to say 3 is bigger than 5. Yeah, sure do. You just stole people's class time, for garbage. I have a right to say, the Holocaust didn't happen. You sure do. All of your classmates hate you. Way to go. All the people on your dorm floor hate you. Nicely done. And if you said it on Facebook, you're potentially never getting a job. So bravo you. We have rights. Very nice. Okay, what are our responsibilities? And for me, especially teaching freshmen, this is a great opportunity to talk to them about becoming adults now. We actually in Plug have a conversation. Do you see yourselves as adults or kids or something? And then it's fun to ask the next thing. Do you see yourselves as adults? What is that? And it gets them forward to, okay, you know what? I think if we have to have a conversation where a view opposed to abortion comes into this space, I gotta do it. Even if it's just in office hours. Professor Lopez, please kind of get this into the space so there's Professor Lopez, you really don't get being Muslim. Here's why. So what do we have for you before we get to much more questions? So we've got some model lesson plans that Amanda's actually been developing PowerPoints you could plug your stuff into. They involve sometimes hypotheticals. Here's a hypothetical that's supposed to distinguish the differences between politeness and civility. Hypotheticals designed to address the question of who gets to decide what something means. The Confederate flag taking a knee, Black Lives Matter. Who decides what things mean? A variety of them. Ones that are designed around info literacy, designed around current events. Is it different if the president calls you a name than if you call the president a name? All kinds of things like this typo we just we have support from us, Mammoth. They actually work as a research assistant in law school, but for me and this project, you can come to me and I can offer you some of the tools for creating an art on the website. We're having several events that relate to civil discourse. On September 27th, Josh Blackman is coming to WCL. Well, these are all up on the board. He was sort of shouted down at CUNY Law School when he went there as conservative. He's currently representing people who want to publish 3D gun downloadable plans on the internet. Got Garrett Epps, who wrote that Burdens of Free Speech article, coming to K. So there's lots of students for your students. Some complex problem students are actually going to come to K at lab time Wednesday, October 17th to talk about the unequal burdens of free speech and what that might mean. And on November 1st in the evening, we have Amanda Warner, the Monopoly Man, who's a consumer advocate and activist who also does things like dress up as the Monopoly Man and troll Mick Mulvaney in congressional hearings with their law degree, and has gotten into the business of chasing Trump administration officials out of restaurants. So we're going to talk about the rights, the career, the choices of how you use your voice and what that means for who you are out in the professional world. We're going to have breakout sessions in that one. There are going to be a bunch more, and we're open to actually. And the last thing, this isn't in something we can offer yet, but we are going to have peer leaders who are going to be available to lead some of these thematic discussions with your students if you want. And so there'll be undergraduates trained in developing some of the tough conversations things that you can have them as a guest speaker, or you can have them as a co-curricular activity to engage your students in a discussion around one of these topics that you can work with and say, I want ours on intellectual diversity or marginalized communities or tying things to careers. And we got a lot. We can make more. So we raised, we do have time. We do have time to actually talk interactively. Yes. Which means it's time for questions. Okay. Yeah.
So I want to pick up on your comment about living in communities and how that affects different classes. And sort of that gets at kind of going beyond the classroom specifically, right? And we're helping young adults or sort of people who are in a growth mode to integrate hopefully different parts of their lives in better ways. And I was really struck by it because up to now, all I've heard is like the learning communities are like great for retention, sort of all the positive pieces. And I hadn't really thought about the things that you mentioned. Just yesterday, I saw what looked like a high school student wearing this T-shirt that said, "I can't adopt today," and I was struck by like both the use of adopt as a verb. So, but it kind of made the point, right? It's kind of like in this transition phase, and it's kind of like not every day. And I'm curious how we kind of go beyond what's happening in the classroom to try to integrate into that learning, living space in ways that will help them hopefully to integrate these ideas more into their broader lives.
Well, I think learning objectives and learning outcomes, it's like the first little while you're here, you're like, stop making me write extra stuff on my syllabus. My syllabus is like longer than, Bible or something now. But then you realize like, actually, it's good to have a point, So when you think about objectives and outcomes, the course, they end up tying over to other parts of life. And I went to a liberal arts hippie college. I was an English major, so I don't love the idea of this being, the waiting room in front of your career. But that being said, what are we here for? We want to get good at stuff. We want to get good at adulting. And so I think saying, we've got these things we're trying to accomplish. And we've got some reasons, like we hope to pay our student loans someday through, earning money, which can be used for goods and services. So some of the habits of mind and behaviors that we want, we're doing here. And then you can say, I feel more comfortable now because I've worked closely with some learning communities that have wildly varying degrees of types of cultures. Where my UC courses were like, students don't remember romper room that I did. Right, it's Mr. Road, but with comma. And then PPLs who really rub each other the wrong way, ostracize one another, don't make a great impression to their SBA colleagues. And it's tough. And when you say, what happens beyond here, it's a part of here. So one, you can think deeply on whether your discussions beyond this room are helping or hurting your success in this room? Are you digging in? Could your time be better spent in understanding better rather than evangelizing? And are you actually deepening biases rather than opening your mind? So maybe it's not related to your course learning goals. And then in terms of your life learning goals, you want to be a campaign manager, God help you. Great, but these people actually have to really understand what the opposing views are. They have to really understand how to not, it's not just riling up your people, right? So how to not screw up. So I think it's fair, Damon, that everybody's different. I think of the whole person, and in ways it helps because you get fewer horrible papers and fewer people are sort of miserable and just stressed to the point of distress. So it's worth, bringing in. And with freshmen, it's really important as they're learning new adult. So I feel comfortable saying it, and we also in Clegg we have a conversation right before kind of midterms time. Like, is everybody freaking out yet? How are you? Because a lot of times, we're energized like that and hyper aroused like that because we're upset. And I'll just say one more thing on this, and then we'll, there's a lot of sort of a wrap on this idea of safe spaces and sensitive students. But we all have a safe space. It's called our house. Like, if you can't go back to your house and like at least be left alone with your sort of opinions and ideas and not attacked, like maybe time to bring in a mental health professional to support your family. Right? We get that, and especially in living learning, we never. So being mindful of that, I think, is kind.
It's sort of catching a related topic, I guess, is like ways to sort of model the idea of like getting beyond the bubble. I mean, God knows, I live in my own little bubble, but I find in my life I'm greatly enriched by those people in my circle who have very different views, with whom I really enjoy having, civil discourse, I guess, and they push my thinking and I hopefully push theirs. And I don't know if there's ways to sort of structurally do that.
There's a couple. One is you can have students, you can assign them to argue the side that they're not on of something and then pair them with someone who might have an opposing view. Or one is I have the students look at whichever political party platform is the one they're not in and find something that they like in it, and then look at the one that they are and find something they don't like in it. It's funny how people read them, actually. I think saying, maybe don't take the class beyond the class offers an opportunity to just hang out with Sophia because you play intramural frisbee with her. And that's what you do. But I'm really hesitant to push that a lot because I think the bubble thing is overdone where more of us are in, there are conservative bubbles and they're bigger and they're vast counties, and there are white bubbles and maybe there are definitely upper middle class bubbles. And I think that a challenge that I struggle with is how to do better than the kind of lazy media narrative that it's people who actually represent sort of the majority of people who live in a diverse metropolitan community who are in the bubble and then looking at the wrong bubble. So I just feel, I guess my bad answer is I don't feel confident to go all of the way there because I think I'll be not good enough at recognizing the bubbles that hurt more people at AU that aren't talking about it. And just an example of that is that these are 3 quotes, actual quotes from students in the PPL program from a few years ago. I've never lived in such a diverse community. I've never lived in a community that was like as non-diverse as this. And I didn't know what white people thought of us until I got here. They were all in the same living learning community of like 25 students. And I'm not good enough at this to know what to do with that. If others are, please come and we want to have some lunch brown bags around this great thing as well. You worked with this.
Yeah, so I was an STA student, so I was not a PPL, I was not in the living learning community, I was not in, I did a UC my freshman year, but like that, I don't even think they have that anymore.
Sort of complex problems is kind of
Yeah. And so I know from the experience of like being in class with people that were in living learning communities, all of us that were not in living learning communities, didn't really enjoy having them in class. Even with other people, they could be sort of combative. They kind of have this like imposter syndrome of like, I know everything because I'm in this living learning community and you know nothing, and we're the same major, we took all the same classes. Like we know exactly the same. But then from the flip side, you know, I was a graduate assistant, and the bulk of the people in our classes are from these living learning communities because like they have two options for a major, it's like one of them. And I had a couple of students in the second semester kind of sit me down and be like, the one student was like, I was really talkative in high school. Like, I grew up in South Carolina and I was the only liberal student, so I like really liked to share my opinion. He was like, I came here and I'm not the most liberal student anymore, and that doesn't really sit well with the other people, so I don't talk. And he was really smart, really sweet kid, did really great in office hours with me, but in class you could just see like he kind of primed into himself, and I tried to work with him a little bit about like speaking up, and he came to office hours and I thought he got his participation, but it was just very tough to see that you know that wasn't my experience at AU, and to see that that is some people's experience at AU. There needs to be something to be done, and hopefully this is the solution. We had another student who said that he got shouted down in the lab like every night, and I was like, that is not a healthy living environment. Just like one, from like a basic human standpoint, like you should not be in an environment where you're being yelled at every day. But two, like the interesting thing was like he agreed politically with everyone, but it was just that they were attacking like his intelligence, like his being. And I was like, that kind of takes it a step further now. Like this is bullying, this is harassment, and it would leak into the classroom. Like, they wouldn't sit with him, or they would walk by in the hallway and kind of snicker, or they would have comments about. So we had a rule: no more than 2 people from the living learning committee were allowed to be in a group project together. That way they had to branch out, kind of have to break out a little bit. And the one student, they rolled their eyes because they didn't want to work with the one person. And they were like, we don't like them. No one in this community likes them.
And then the thing that you find out as well is that a student in a community learning community that's got that dynamic that's maybe, I don't know, at age 18, not positive, you know, after all, that they want to do this particular type of intellectual property laws, it turns out can feel really unsteady because everyone else has got so much certainty. And I think one of the things to really see is that when you look at the causes of the challenges that we have with students and conversations, they're not actually around like single payer or immigration or flat taxes. They're actually about the culture of certainty. Really excited for Reverend Schaefer's book, The Certainty of Uncertainty, that's coming out soon. So, this guy, sorry, yeah, but this is culture of certainty. It comes out of the media environment, a lot of opinion media, a lot of media that's designed to mark which team you're on. And certainty really does not lead to good discussions. It doesn't lead to listening. It doesn't lead to developing ideas. It's not great for academics. It's kind of the opposite. And it's addressing that piece, which is why we feel that the info literacy component is so important, and our library colleagues are so critical, because they have a ton of stuff on, you know, how do we vet sources, how do we vet the source of information we have, what's credible. That if you move away from certainty and get to, and you've heard from our colleagues here, you know, how great questions are. If you move toward the requirement is that you find a question, a lot of these challenges start to really dissipate. And we can also model it, you know, ourselves. And getting to the bubble, I assumed the role of Justice Scalia a fair bit. We were not, you know, super twinsies. So if you can I'll take the very best articulation of some perspective that is not consistent with what I think my students are going for here, or find some way to rip apart what they do. An entire semester flight course for me was based on criticizing the free college proposal, the Democratic free college proposal, why it's not good. I mean, it could be good, but why it's not as good as we think it is, or why it has to be fixed in some way, which weirded them out a little, because for the first few weeks because they kept thinking I was trying to sell it. They're like, none of these readings showed it really great lines. I wonder what's happening. I can't read, I'm illiterate. So trying to find ways to get them out of their own bubble by making them prove something that's contrary to what they thought when they came in to help. And that'll help a little bit with, I don't like Julia so much. Because it turns out you don't know more than Julia. Nor is she an immoral, terrible person for not having walked in here thinking that, your policy ideal was in the 10 Commandments or something.
Just more about universal learning design and how you create a trauma environment.
Both. I mean, you talked to the Wellness Center more than, do you want to kind of take the lead on that?
Yeah, so
Can you repeat the question?
Universal design for learning and trauma informed. I think we're going to start with trauma informed and move to universal design. I think trauma informed is a subset, but
right. So the trauma informed approach, I spoke to OASIS, which is the Office of Advocate Services, and then the Wellness Center, which is now the Activity Center. And so what we kind of talked to them about was the way that certain language does affect people that are trauma informed. I'm a trauma survivor, so I was a JLC double minor here, and now I'm a law student. And so some of the things that we talk about do affect me in a way that don't affect people that are not trauma survivors. And so what we kind of talked about with the Wellness Center and with OASIS was ways to teach faculty that it's not a trigger warning. I know everyone hears that word and they're like, no, like the snowflakes, the safe spaces. It's not really that, right? It's like certain things are going to affect me and my identity that aren't going to affect other people. And I've never been of the mindset that I can't listen to something because it's going to affect me that way. And leave the room. And so what we talked to OASIS and Wellness Center about was really just like education, talking to people about like, what they can do. You don't need to give trigger warning on your syllabus, but something you can say is like, today we're going to be talking about like PREA, which is the prison breakdown. And we're going to be watching a documentary and it does have some sensitive material, just as a warning. You don't have to put anything else really outside of that. There's also this thing called agency, right? So I have agency over myself, over my body, over what I know I can handle. And so usually if I think that a material is going to be something that I can't handle personally, I will reach out to my professor and be like, I'm going to sit for what I can. If I need to leave, I'm going to leave. It's a personal choice. It doesn't need to come from the professor himself.
And I think the other thing is some people are very hesitant about opt-out. But imagine in academia that there's a continuum. And so I can watch this documentary in a room full of people among whom I feel alone because they haven't been child abuse survivors, rape survivors, victims of police violence. And I'm not going to engage with this material at all. These are extremes. And one thing a person can offer if they want to be trauma informed is say, if there's material that, and a lot of our jobs, don't involve doing stuff that's really emotionally difficult for us in front of a whole lot of people, right, for a grade. So an option is saying, if you've got a challenge, first of all, come to me, but engage with your agency and your responsibility in a learning community as an adult member of an adult learning community. Let me know. And then what are the alternatives? Is it we chat about this subject matter in office hours? Do you write me a reflection that might or might not have any degree of, and you've got to tell them, you don't have to disclose. You can say this is hard for me. You don't have to say because on December 12th this thing happened right here. Do it like disability. They have an accommodations letter. You don't get to find out what their chronic illness is. It's not how it goes. It's voluntary. You can say, you do office hours. Your idea of reflection. We can engage in some way. Something else. You can tell me, subject to the tenets of the Academic Integrity Code, that you went to the library and watched the documentary, and assert to me that you did. And so and that is universal design for learning. So universal design comes from disability. The idea being, there's accessibility and adaptation. So like Kerwin has disability access, right? First is inaccessible to people with mobility disabilities, including the ones you can't see, right? The heavy doors. There are people who walk that don't use that many steps or open or is it that way, right? Kerwin has a ramp so that you have a building that was built to exclude and then you made it more inclusive. And SIS, you just roll right in, right? It's universally designed. So it's good for everyone. It's not less accessible to some people. WCL thinks it's accessible, but it's wildly inaccessible to people with visual disabilities, anxiety, sometimes of autism. It's terrible, terrible, inaccessible campus. Sorry, guys. So universal design is just like that. What can I do to build it so it's better for everyone? My favorite universal design idea is the button that opens the door for you. It has a wheelchair on it, but it could have like, Lara with 40 binders, right? If I can get this with my elbow, I'm gonna get into the building without looking like as much of an idiot, dropping my stuff. I'll be differently awkward. So your course can be like that. And so this trauma informed, it's like, my learning objective isn't to make people watch this documentary about sexual assault in prison in front of a whole group of people. My learning objective is that they get this and they get whatever educational component I was trying to get across in this documentary, which could be anywhere from sitting and watching it with 30 people to watching it in some different format to reading something else that's on the exact same material that I don't have to watch it. There's a lot, so make it equally accessible. We do that in a lot of other ways. In all of my classes, I don't allow laptops, but instead of making people disclose that they have an accommodation, there's one laptop a day. Everybody can scribble notes or just listen, and one person a day takes notes on a laptop, puts them on a Google Doc, and we have that on a Google Doc link, then everybody in the class has the same great set of notes that someone took every day. If you choose to do this, don't give people credit for it because it's not an equally accessible activity. Someone who's an English language learner or has some visual disability or other couldn't participate, so you just made the class inaccessible. But it's basically like you've just done disability ASAC notes for everyone in the room. And they're really good, and then everyone can listen and pay attention. Everyone uses them.
Never had a problem with them volunteering.
You get people who's always cool. Yep, they do a good job. They have that one day. Everybody gets it. It builds a little bit of collaboration around it. So that's an example. We give multiple options for assessments, including modes. People can do everything from write a paper to create a PowerPoint where they're pretending to give a presentation to actually coming in and talking to me for 10 minutes alone in my office and then getting billed for 20. This is a final exam option for an Oxford tutorial, which is really funny, but I swear enough that you can tell that it's funny. But there are all these, it's multimodal, and the idea being there's no barrier unrelated to the learning. Like if you're teaching English, you can't replace all your big funky, Victorian novels with something shorter and still teach the class. But if there's anything you're doing that's actually unrelated to the learning objectives that could be a barrier to someone, you let it go. So for me, there's nothing about teaching the CLEG class, which is a problem solving and government class, that actually makes it necessary for me to give any grade related to a person's English language proficiency. It's got to be like sort of, proofread and done. It's, professional and a second draft at least, but there's nothing about my learning objectives that tie to English language proficiency. I don't test it. And for class participation, universal design involves having multi-modes of assessing it if you grade class participation. So our class participation was very upfront about it. It can include helping another student learn the material, coming to office hours, posting on Blackboard either an observation or an interesting reading that you found, talking in class, doing some form of listening exercise, a bunch of things, and office hours, and at the end of the semester they do an ungraded Blackboard quiz in which they rate themselves on all of those modes, including their listening, and give an assessment of how they did, including I had a student who's in the leadership program who said, I've never been great at listening. I always want to jump in, and here's how I worked on my listening across the semester. Or people who said, I'm the kind of person who just waits till the end of the class to absorb and then raise my hand. So that's why you saw it happen at the end of the class. The entire time I've done that, I've only had like 3 or 4 people give them better grades than they really deserved on class participation. I've learned a ton. Oh, and I include one, was there any barrier to your participation that we didn't address here. You know, if you're, and you can disclose what it is and say, you know, something gave me a problem using it. You know, was there something that made it more difficult? I will say that women tend to give themselves lower grades than they deserve. So it's not the final grade. Oh, I gave myself an 84. You know, I did everything you put on the list that's good class participation, but that still doesn't sound like being an outgoing, confident dude to me. So I guess I get an 84. Yes. Okay, so you obviously give your own grade. This is a great exercise for women. You warn them in advance. Hey, this is what class participation is. And I find that universally designed because neurodiversity or a speech disorder or English language, ideological diversity, being a shy person, doesn't interfere. There's nothing about your identity. There's nothing unrelated to the course material that gets assessed. And they like it.
We had a student in our second semester. She was not a native speaker. She was from Nannarone, I believe. And speaking up in class was hard for her because she couldn't really follow what we were saying. It just took her more time. So what I would do is I would send her like the notes of the PowerPoints beforehand so she could kind of read through it, go through it, have an idea of what we were talking about. And even then after that, if she had questions or she didn't really want to speak up, she would come to office hours and she would just ask me her questions then, and her and I would really go through like where she was having trouble, what I could help her, what I could explain, how I could help her make this, you know. And she actually got a very good participation grade.
She earned it.
Yeah, she earned it. It was good participation. She came to office hours every week. And that's not necessary, obviously, for good participation, but like she really, really wanted to do well. She wanted to be engaged. That was great.
And so one thing I'll just say, and we'll take it, universal design for learning, you know, comes out of the language for disability. But the thing is, it's like the button on the door. It's supposed to make it better for everybody. And I think, hopefully that's, including like if you get a chronic illness or your uncle dies or something like that, those universally accessible notes become something that you really need.
And just two final comments about civil discourse. Two things I find very helpful is I always, often just ask students, I ask a question and then I don't call on anyone. Students know at this point, I pause to reflect. Let's just say P2R, pause to reflect. And I think that that leads to much better conversations. And I would love in your journals, like for your reflections, the student questions, just to ask